as a financial advisor for over 20 years, one of the common questions I get asked by people is, hey Azul, what could I do in order to be able to retire 5 years earlier? Right? Maybe we've done some financial planning, maybe they're 50 years old and we're looking at retiring at 65 and the numbers all work out, and their question is, what could we do to retire at 60 or 55? How do I retire earlier? And I think it's a really important question. So let's go for a walk today, and I'm going to share with you what I share with my clients. So, basically there's three main levers that you can pull. There's three main things that you can do if you want to retire earlier. And one of them is you can reduce your expenses. One of the first questions I ask somebody when we're doing financial planning is, what does retirement look like to you? What do you think that's going to cost? Because that's going to drive everything else, is what the expenses are. So one option is to reduce expenses. The next option is to have more money, right? To somehow increase your nest egg so that you get, instead of lowering your expenses, you have enough assets in your plan, in your retirement accounts, that you can afford the expenses that you initially came up with. So that's the second one. And then the third one is something that people often don't think about, and that is to have a side job, to do something part-time. Maybe somebody's working, they're working hard, and they've just lost their passion for their job. And it's one thing to do your job for 40, 50, 60 hours a week, whatever it is, but it's quite another to do your job for 10 or 15 hours a week. So oftentimes the best answers for retirement, the best answers for complicated questions is not either or, but the answer is both, right? Is there something you could do to have additional income come in? Is there something you could do to lower your expenses? And on the expense side, candidly, for people that retire before 65, one of the bigger expenses is healthcare insurance. It depends on how you're set up. There is the Affordable Care Act, there are the subsidized plans, but you have to watch what your income is. So looking at where your money's coming in from in retirement can make a big difference. If your money's coming in from like a regular 401k or a regular IRA, guess what? That's going to be taxable income. The good news is when you put that money into those accounts, the government, you did not have to pay money on that income, but now it's time to pay the piper. And unfortunately, not only do you have to pay the federal tax on that, but it can impact your qualification for a subsidy on healthcare. So coming up with a solution that, maybe working part-time, you can get healthcare benefits. And so that addresses two questions, right? That it addresses the question, maybe you don't have enough money right now to retire, but if you made an extra $10,000 a year, let's say, or $15,000 a year, it would move the needle for you, and it very well may reduce your expenses depending on how you qualify for healthcare insurance. So, a lot of times when I mention the part-time job, people will say, well, I'm not sure I want to do a part-time job. I want to retire. And again, there's two parts to this. One is there's a big difference between doing something for 20 hours a week and doing something for 40, 50, or 60 hours a week. But the second piece to this on a part-time job is just realizing, believe it or not, 40 to 45%, depending on the study that you look at, of all Americans have a side hustle. I mean, that's a staggering number. It's almost half of us have some kind of side hustle to give us additional income. So it's much more common than people think. And not only is it more common, but almost 20% of people report that their side hustle gives them over $1,000 a month of additional income. I mean, that moves the needle, right? Particularly if you can couple $1,000 a month with also maybe lowering your expenses, that can be a big difference. So that can be super helpful for folks. And so why would you want to do this? Why, if you're working full time, why would you think about working part-time, why would you think about doing a part-time job? Well, for one, it gives you a lot more flexibility, right? Part-time jobs are a lot easier to pick up than full-time jobs, particularly as we start getting older, right? I hate to say it, but the reality is ageism is alive and well in the United States. And as we get older, it gets harder and harder to find a good full-time job. But there's many more part-time jobs available. So if you wanted to maybe travel 3 months out of the year, it gives you the freedom to do that, right? You quit your part-time job, you quit your side hustle, you go do what you wanted to do, you come back, and then you pick it up again when you get back. So it gives you that flexibility. It also, frankly, can be the best of both worlds. You know, when you look at retiring, there's really 4 stages to retirement, and most of us focus on that first stage, which is that vacation feeling, right? We've been doing what we've been doing for 20, 30, 40 years, and it just feels good to finally be done, right? And to be able to relax and to be able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, and with whom you want to do it, 7 days a week, not just 1 or 2 days a week. So that's the first phase, is that vacation feeling. But the next 2 phases can be difficult, and frankly, having a part-time job, having a side hustle can help some people with this. And that is the next 2 phases. The second phase is loss, right? Where you're feeling a loss of purpose. You're missing some of the friends that you might have had at work. You're missing the routine that you had at work. And again, having a part-time job can help you, or a side hustle, something that's your own thing. You're not reporting to a boss anymore. You don't have to show up at a certain time. You have more flexibility. But a side hustle, a part-time job, can help with that feeling of loss. And it can also help with the next phase, which is where you're kind of iterating and finding out, who are you outside of that full-time job? What are the things that matter to you? What are the things that give you a passion that you want to do? Because, you know, after doing something professionally for 20, 30, 40 years, it becomes a big part of our identity, and thinking through, who am I outside of my job? That can be a challenge. And sometimes for some people, we're better off, you know, coming out of the water slowly, as opposed to just, you know, doing a quick pull-up out of the water and facing the new reality and facing our new environment. So it can be helpful on that front as well. You know, clearly it can be helpful on the financial front. Making an extra $10,000 a year is the equivalent, in some ways, not entirely, but is the equivalent of having about $250,000 of additional savings, at least for the years while you're making that money. If you had an additional $250,000 and you use the 4% rule, which is the sustainable withdrawal rate, that would give you an extra $10,000 a year. But because you're doing this part-time job, maybe you don't need that. And maybe because you got this part-time job, you're saving an extra $500 a month on what healthcare insurance is going to cost until you get on Medicare. So that can be very, very helpful. And you know, people think, well, once I get to 65, then my healthcare insurance issue is gone. And you want to be careful with that, because yes, when you qualify for Medicare, that covers a lot of things, and it's a great program. We're fortunate to have it. As a senior, I'm glad I have that. Well, when I get to that age, I'll be glad I have that safety net. But it's important to also recognize that according to Fidelity, even with Medicare, Fidelity claims we're going to need over $150,000 once we reach age 65 for what the average costs are for things that Medicare doesn't cost. So yes, it's nice to get to that point. I've talked about, you know, getting to 65 so you're on Medicare, but realize it's not a complete finish line. There still are costs associated with this. So I've been talking about side hustles, been talking about part-time jobs, and that's what this video up here talks about. These are 5 part-time jobs for retirees that pay pretty well. So thank you for watching this, and I'll see you in this video up here. 5 good paying remote jobs for retirees. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.